Give that over my name. Thank you.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. We have got the distillery, owner of Garden Gems, and he also has a small little company called Vivid Solutions, and he builds ponds all over Bear County.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. And has done some amazing things. He even has built the ponds at Gilbert's.
We maintain Gilberters,
And the gardens, you know.
Garden Center, we maintain wings, and we built the feature at Rainbow Gardens on Thousand Oaks, and we're currently building the feature, the water pond, or the pond at Rainbow Gardens on Bandera.
So he's gonna tell us today, as we plan for spring, we got trips this past 2 weeks. I have irises coming up, and my fish are looking hungry, and I just wanted to get out there and cut things, and it just didn't happen. And yesterday, boom, it reminded me it's still January. So now is the time to think about improving your ponds, designs, adding a bog, tuning up your filter system. And so Gary's gonna tell us from the small end on how you might make a few changes to if you won the lotto, have at it.
Or financing.
Ew. Now go, never mind, I'm not gonna say what I'm gonna say.
Alright, so Deb wanted me to go over a little bit about like my background and how I got into ponds and water features. Most of growing up, I was always into aquariums. Turned into, from freshwater, kind of experimenting with your nice, normal community tropical fish and getting into aggressive fish, and then getting bored with that, going into saltwater and then reef tanks. So fish have always been kind of my background and something I've always enjoyed. Getting into water features and ponds is a simple transition. Ecosystems are the same way that we're looking into aquariums, and water balance and fish health and everything is the same. So many years ago, doing landscaping for a majority of 26 years now, we would always incorporate little water features here and there into the landscapes. At one point, I subbed it all out because we focused on landscaping. And I never really realized, one, how fun it could be going into water features, but two, how much joy it kind of brings to people and to the landscapes. So getting into 2017, we were asked by Gordon actually to come out to Fair Oaks Ranch and speak to a lady that wanted a pond redo. And it was, some of you might know her, Melanie Oldwender. It was a small pond and really wasn't ever installed correctly. So there was muck buildup in the bottom, the 2 foot deep pond, but it was only about 6 to 8 inches of water. It was horrible. And fish, I don't even know how the fish were surviving at that point. So we contracted to do that. And it was supposed to be a weekend job because I was still running a landscape company here in San Antonio. And turned out that we did the pond, we did a pondless water feature out there, we did a fountain out there, we did the landscape, and it just kept progressing and progressing. That was kind of the beginning and the start going into Vivid Outdoor Solutions. That was my kind of thought process, like, hey, it's going to be this good, then we're going to keep going with it. Around 2009, 2010, there was a company called the Pond Crew, and they put in a lot of ponds. Your guys' pond, John did yours. They disappeared, and no one ever took the spot of that company. John was the #1 company in San Antonio at the time for building ponds and water features. So, learning in 17, when I was coming here to Water Gardens, buying product for the pond in Fair Oaks, Shane, the old owner, said, hey, if you ever want more work, I have a ton of work for you, just let me know. Well, we'll see how Fair Oaks goes if we really want to do this. And it went uphill from that. So now, as of today, dealing with water guard gems, they were really the basis for me starting the statement to ponds and transitioning where up and through really 2019, we never did much anything other than water features. I didn't really get back into landscaping. We would add lighting here and there, but and now today, now we're full service. So now we get into absolutely everything to do with outdoors, from outdoor living to the ponds, fountains, water features, koi health, everything. So we have guys in crews now that can take care of, one crew does the pond maintenance, another crew does, two crews do construction, another one does lawn maintenance. So we've really kind of diversified, and buying this in October of 20, or 21, excuse me, this was huge. It was a big step. And I have learned so much over the last year of having a retail store. I'm a construction guy. I don't know retail. I've never been in retail. So this was a complete learning curve. But I knew going into this, after I got into running through the systems and going through the place 100 times and staying up here till midnight, what we had to do, which was keep the health of the ponds and the fish up to par. And at the point when we took it over, the filter systems were really in havoc. So that was my first really big undertaking here, besides cleaning the bathrooms.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank my wife, because she really busted her tail cleaning. So, that goes into the same way that we try to design the ponds, is it's all based on filter systems. Everything from ease of maintenance to the koi health, water quality, it's all based on filtering. There's a little bit of an old school way that's been taught here at the store for 20 years. And it's get rid of rock, get rid of gravel, get rid of plants, or just have plants in a bog outside the pond, or because your koi are going to eat them, because gravel it attracts bacteria and it'll hurt your fish and everything. It's complete false. It's if you let anything go, if you let a liner only pond go, and you don't backwash your filter, you don't change your filter pads, your fish health is going to go downhill. So either way, it'll cause damage. So now, as you see on the property and from the last year, we put in the ecosystem pond at the front, but it's a combination. It has external filtration, and it has more biological filtration inside as well. So under the gravel, there's piping. It looks like an under gravel filter, just like with aquariums. I heard you saying you do aquariums?
Yeah.
Okay, so the old school, we used to have a lot of under gravel filters and stuff. It's the same way in the ponds. All that sediment, fine sediment breakdown that sits at the bottom that people complain about, is, I gotta clean my pond, I gotta take it out. That pond has been up for almost a year now, and there's no sediment at the bottom of that pond. Though you can still see the rocks completely clear. So it's turnover, it's the type of filter we put in there, how much circulation within the pond to keep things stirred up and moving, more movement of water, bigger your fish are gonna grow, healthier fish are gonna stay. So for me, it's always been about getting the junk out of the water, good circulation, and just overall good water quality. So going into the spring, going into upgrading ponds, there's been, over the year of being here, I've learned that there's a lot of people that still have just a pump in the bottom of the pond, some filter floss, and they call it a filter, right? And it's only thing it's filtering is getting debris to that filter pad. Other than that, it's just circulating the bacteria and junk in your pond constantly. So you have everything breaking down still in your pond. Your phosphates are going through the roof, your nitrates are going through the roof, because you're not really extracting anything out of the pond. And now we have to start worrying about water quality and then fish health. So part of this, I'm not going to go into the disease thing.
You're good. This is good.
Yeah, part of getting into this is the stuff that we see in the springtime. It's all because of water quality, and because we don't, we're not doing good water changes, we're not taking debris out of our ponds, we don't have proper filtration on our ponds. So we get into seeing the things where the fish coming out of the wintertime and their immune systems are so low, their bodies can't handle this huge outburst of bacteria that's growing in the ponds. And so we're getting different bacteria that's now spiking, and it's attacking the fish. Their slime floats are low, and everything is wrong in the spring. So if we can create a healthy ecosystem going into the spring, that's the goal. So for me, unless you're going to be showing koi, and we're worried about taking a $500 or $5,000 koi and it hitting rocks, then liner only is perfect. If you're going to go that route, then stick with liner only, because I would want to protect the koi as well the same way. But in a normal, healthy environment, I can show you 1,000 different ponds that are all ecosystem-based ponds, but it's all based on how they've been installed, and it works right. So going back into the property, we will continue to install different ponds throughout the property. The liner onlys we have, the ecosystem ponds, to show people the differences, pros and cons of both ways of building. Using filtration systems that we're selling in the store and actually physically using them on the ponds. So you can see what they're doing, you can see the quality that they create. Whether it's pressure filters or bead filters or, yes sir?
What filtration do you use for that pond?
The ecosystem pond?
Yeah.
So we have a Pond Max pressure filter on that pond. So it just has pads and a little bit of bioballs at the bottom. And then really, the only reason I put that on there is more for taking the sediment out of the water. And it catches it, and we're able to get it out of the water.
Then you back flush it weekly?
Once a week.
Once a week?
Yeah, once a week. So if we really want to keep the water quality up, because that has a heavy fish load on it. There's only about 5 or 6 koi in there, but there's another, I think, 18 golden orf. And right now they're pushing 6 to 8 inches. So there's a decent bio load on that small pond, and that pond's only about 1,300 gallons, I believe it was. But when you combine the pressure filter, and we also have the biological filter, the biofall at the very top of the stream, which has filter pads and media in it. Then you have all that rock in there to house more bacteria. And we have our plants that are helping filter feed and suck up the phosphates and stuff in the water. And we also are using a 36-watt UV sterilizer in that pressure filter. So that helps a lot with any kind of algae growth within our water column. Now, we still see, just like what you've seen with this temperature spike outside, you're going to still see hair algae and string algae getting in your streams and all over your rocks and stuff. But your pond wasn't balanced 3 weeks ago because the cold weather killed all the bacteria. And then all of a sudden we have this big, huge heat wave, and all this bacteria just spikes again, and nothing's in the pond. Plants aren't growing anymore. The bacteria in the filters are dead. If your filter's outside, nothing can eat up those nutrients. So that's when we get all that hair algae. And now, the last couple of weeks, algaecide's been going out the door like crazy because of the hair algae. And then Wednesday or Tuesday, whatever it's going to do, it's going to freeze again. We're going to go back down and come back up. So that's where we worry about the fish, is through these up and down temperatures going through. So the more beneficial bacteria you can have in that pond, and thinking ahead going into the spring, using cold water bacteria and start to add and start dosing back into the pond before you get this big spike. When the temperature goes up, you won't have such an initial hit on the pond with bacteria if you're treating early. So with you guys probably have a lot of plants in the ponds and stuff like that, you have a ton of bacteria within the root structure and the kind of soil or anything in there.
So my problem is the bottom of my pond is irregular. So I don't have really good flow
Right.
all the way around. I do have bubblers. We got 2 bottom drains, but because where we are, I don't have a flat surface.
Yeah.
I'll get pools of gunk.
Sure. So that goes into the whole, like I said, we know with that particular pond, that one has the bottom grid for that. It also has jets throughout in the walls. I think there's 2 or 3 jets in that pond that blow debris off shelves, blow it down below. So you can add in a secondary pump
Just for water.
just for water
Just to move it
movement.
around.
Yeah,
Basically, we've got a filter on it.
Yeah.
Constantly.
So you want to try to get that back down to those bottom drains or whatever kind of extraction point you have.
Because I have a perfect system that
Yeah.
if it's not moving to get
Sure.
pushed, wonderful.
Yeah, so, and there's different ways to do it. You can do it with an external pump and plumb in and just create jets. Just blow water in one direction or towards your bottom drains or towards a skimmer or something like that.
Like bubblers. Use air stones in the holes.
Well,
That's what she has, air stones in.
I've got air stones, I've
Yeah.
got 5 air stones around.
Yeah, so what we learned about in that case too is going into the wintertime with air, right? The fish need oxygen, that's one of the main reasons they grow. So, but in the wintertime, we try to move the air up, and we don't want it at the very bottom, so we can keep the warmer water at the bottom. And that way they have somewhere to retreat to when it gets, 30 degrees or below. So we can move those air stones up, but when it's at the very bottom, depending on the type of stone you have, if it's a disc, if it's like a normal glass stone, if it was one of, like Shane used to make these PVC risers, and the discs screw to those. Some of it, because of where the air is going to come out, it never even touches hardly anything around it. So using a glass stone, because the air comes out all the way around it, that stone, 360, that's going to push and move debris.
This is just the rectangle.
Little stone.
Yeah.
And that's good, because that's what we're saying, a normal air stone, it'll push all the way around 360
Correct.
degrees around that stone, but the discs we sell, like the weighted Matala discs, they only come out the top. So it sits on the base and it just has that bladder, that where the air comes out of that, and it doesn't actually give you any kind of movement side to side like a normal air stone does.
Okay, great.
But circulation pumps are the best way for that. So, I guess I don't really know your guys' ponds. I know, I know your pond well. But, so what do you have, what kind of filtration systems do you guys use currently and stuff? I mean, are you using skimmers, no filtration, plants only, bogs?
Yes.
Yes, across the, okay. So,
I have a skimmer and I have 2 bogs. And
Yeah.
3
What was the-
waterfalls.
okay, what was the first part?
So I have, 2 bogs,
Okay,
3 waterfalls, 2 pumps, a skimmer,
okay.
and plant.
So bogs, this has probably been my biggest nightmare going into this industry is how bog filters are built. They've been taught over the years, even since Burke has been here, when he first had it, that these were actually off on from what Shane and maybe even Burke had put in about the original way to how to build a bog filter. And it's great, it works, we built them this way, but over the years, we've come up with our own methods because they're an absolute nightmare to clean. This exact pond is still back here, it's still the exact same way as it was in these pictures. And every couple of years, the gal has to go in and clean this out. You can see, physically see, because all of these pipes are drilled. You can see where there's water movement and where there's dead spots. We get dead spot, you have a whole bunch of algae growing in that spot. And this one's completely clear and nice, pretty gravel. So now, if we do build this way, and it's only certain applications where we do this anymore, at the ends, where the pipe ends, we'll 90 them up and put screw caps in there. So that we can actually take and put air down in there if we want to, or let them flush out. Everyone knows our calcium problem, and because of our hard water. It clogs up everything, so if you have, let's say you have slotted pipe, that slotted pipe will clog up in a year, or less, depending on what part's down there. So we drill them, so we have less resistance, and that water can still go somewhere. You have to be a little more creative when you drill, because you have to do all your volume calculations and make sure you're not gonna back pressure your pump. Yeah.
Have you guys built any bogs with like the aqua blocks?
Yeah, that's what we get to in the show.
Okay, sorry.
No, I got you. Oops. Yeah.
Okay, so you back flush it kind of with air or
Okay.
water. Did you put a sump pump in there and try and pull out?
No, that's the whole problem. That's what I was getting at. That's what I'll show you what his question just was. That's the problem with these bogs. There's nowhere where you can put a sump pump. They were designed wrong from the beginning. The idea is there. They function as long as you have enough water volume coming up through that gravel and pushing hard behind it so that the water can get through the roots, get through the different layers of gravel. But even here, it was hot where you put 12 inches of gravel in. It was just pea gravel. And it's horrible. So if you think of natural filter systems coming out of mountains and stuff, it goes through big gravel, it goes through medium-sized gravel, it goes through fine gravel, and it comes out crystal clear. It's the same thing in a bog filter. It acts exactly the same as it's coming up through the filter it should be, and it should be layered with different sizes of gravel.
Because I've got a bog almost identical to that.
Sure.
Built like that.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a majority of the older ponds and stuff that we come across. This is how they're built.
The science just wasn't there.
No, it wasn't, and so it wasn't there yet. So, but now, like I said, to make it easier to clean, sometimes we'll put 90s in your screw caps on the ends of the pipes, and it's a little easier to clean. Now, there's a cost difference between doing this and the next picture, okay? And it's a huge, significant cost difference. I'm sure you've heard of Aquascape. It's the biggest company in the world for doing pond supplies. Sorry, I don't know why these keep switching, but it's not complicated. Aquascape's made it very easy. If you look at their chart, if you say I have a 500-gallon pond, it'll show you this is the size bog you want, this is how many aqua blocks you need, and you can go from there. The benefit of having, where we're using these snorkels here, and this is called the snorkel, this is the centipede. Everything's upflow through here, through that tubing there, connected into, you can have a pump in a skimmer box, and the return line from that skimmer box goes into your bog. And then you're layering it with the aqua blocks, which look like a milk crate. There's two different sizes. There's a small and a large. And even when these are installed, which is here, you can see down these columns, they make T's now that can actually go across and get more water dispersed in different directions. But typically, what's underneath this fabric that you see here is usually some sort of gravel, because the snorkels here and the centipedes, they stay below or right at grade level. And all of the blocks stack right across there, and they create that grid. Now, when you need to clean this thing out, as long as you flush water through hoses, whatever you want to do, you can put your sump pumps in these snorkels and extract the junk out of there. There's no more taking apart your bogs. There's no more deconstructing all that gravel and having to replace the gravel every 5 years or whatever it may be because of this design. Killer design. But you see, filling rocks around the edges here, that's just to create the gaps or fill the gaps that are between the aqua blocks so you can lock them in tight so they don't move. Then as you come up, you get into smaller gravel. And then at your very top, you're using your pea gravel. And that's where you're going to plant all your plants and all your margins and everything in there. And that valve will continue to run for years upon years. Now, we will go into, because you're going to have dead spots. It's just because once your plants start growing, it's going to block water flow, it's going to do different things. So every now and then, plant thinning, of course, or you can get in there with bare feet, or my kids get in a hog and walk around it and stir it up a little bit, it overflows, and it'll go back into the pond and into our filter, we're vacuuming it out, it'll get out of there. But a much easier and efficient system. The cool thing, this just sounds. The cool thing of this is, it doesn't have to look like a big pile of rock with just plants. That's a bog. So they put different plants throughout it, bubbling pots, the bowls, spillway bowls. You can really dress them up nice and be creative with them. So they're not limited just to be a filter system in your pond. You can actually make it a focal point to the whole feature and really dress it up and make something nice with it. And that's going back into another point of circulation where, sorry, different statuary fountains, bubblers, anything that you can add to the pond to enhance it, to give you more water movement. If you have a dead spot,
It's probably on autoplay.
I'm sorry?
Autoplay.
Yeah, I have it on pause, and it's still, let's see if it'll stay. Okay.
So Gary, is there a size ratio from your bog or your pond?
Yeah, so if you want to get into putting a bog on the pond, typically about 20% of the pond surface area, you create your bog.
Okay.
The main reason we use bog filters, not just to help small ponds, is on large ponds, let's call them 5,000, 6,000 plus gallons, you're not going to get a filter system, or most people aren't going to want to pay the price for a filter system to filter that much water. You get up to, I'll pull a picture of it in a second. We did a pond with 65,000 gallons. There's no way possible, without spending $100,000 on your filter system, that you're going to filter that pond without water.
I guess kind of commercial.
Yeah, so, to be able to turn over, for koi fish, we usually want a minimum of 1 time an hour. If you had just koi in a liner-only pond, nothing else going around there, 1 time is great. We're between 3 and 5 times an hour for turning over ponds. Because once we get into gravel, once we have plants in there, there's shelves and there's different depths and everything, you have to have that circulation. You have to have that water movement. The dead spots in the pond, those are going to be your worst nightmare, because that's where your algae is going to create. That's what's going to drop your water quality, and that's going to be the main problem usually in most ponds. Skimmer placement and biofall placement is huge. Sorry, I'm jumping a little bit here. I'll go back to this one in a second. We see a lot where someone puts a waterfall in and they put a skimmer right in front of them. And then you have these really wide ends to the pond and no movement. So we want to always try, if you're going to have waterfall at one end, your skimmer goes at the opposite end. So that the water's going to push around, it's going to take the debris and take it out of the pond. A lot of concrete ponds, I run into the skimmer, like the waterfall right here, the skimmer's like right here, and all the rest of the pond up here. And no movement, and that creates a whole other algae bloom and problems in one spot, and your fish start getting problems in that way too. So, going into your different depths, like you're talking on yours, ecosystem pond, that's what we want. We want transitioning depths through there, minimum of 3 foot when we're dealing with koi. And you guys had this originally on your pond, John built it with the channel, but yours was just very narrow, so you didn't have as much pond and water space for those fish to grow and everything. So there's a few things to consider when you're putting in the rock and the steps. You can dig that pond to 20 feet wide, and once you start stacking in, you lose that surface area and that volume of water. So if we do, like when you look on Aquascape, you say, I want a large pond kit, it says, remember, I think it's 16 by 20. Well, it's more like 12 by 16 when it's done. That's your actual surface area. And then for depth, say, okay, we want 3 foot, well, we excavate 6 inches past that, so that when we come back up with gravel, we're actually at 3 foot of water in there. So there's a few things to consider when we're building these. And when we have the shelves in here, we'll put the jets behind the rocks, facing out or facing at the bottom, so that all these levels get circulation all the way up. It's not
Behind
intense.
the liner?
No, you can't come through the liner. There's ways to come through the liner with bulkheads, and there's different fittings that make where you sandwich the liner between it. But unless you're really comfortable in understanding how to go through the liner, especially when you're 3-4 foot deep,
Not with the
I'm I'm sorry?
So if you got soil movement, things like that.
Yeah, so you have to leave a little bit of play on the backside, and sometimes, like, you see on pools, when they come through the wall with a jet, they use solid PVC out of that. Your soil can shift and your PVC is not gonna pull apart, whereas if you use a rubber spot hose into a fitting, you have a better chance of that pulling apart. So on the backside, if we ever come through liner, we're using solid PVC, and then once we're away from the pond, we'll transition to an actual solid PVC. I mean, to flex line. So there's little techniques with that stuff.
I was thinking existing ponds, how you would add to that, so you would not have to do anything with the liner.
Now, you have to either come over the top, you just put in create a PVC jet that way.
Put some rocks on it.
Or put some rocks around it or something like that and hide it. But there's not a good way to come through if you're trying to re-dig liner. Because the other thing you run into is when you're trying to even put in a new skimmer. Let's say a skimmer is too small and we want to add in a new one. We run into a problem because if that liner's, call it 5 years, 10 years old, it's already got calcium and debris on it, and you can use vinegar, you can use everything you want to on it. You're still going to get pieces on there that just they don't come off. Now we have a weak point there,
And
and
very hard water.
a possible point where it's going to leak. So yeah.
Do they have, as you said, you come from, you have experience with reef tanks as well.
Yeah.
Do they have, or have you ever used what are they called, the surge pumps that are just big fans?
Sure. Aquascape makes it.
Yeah.
So
I thought they did.
Yeah, Aquascape makes a 12-volt pump now that can actually.
better for.
Yeah, so their system was designed to tie into their lights. That's because it's a two-prong. It's what's just a regular like lamp cord wire,
Yeah.
but it's only 12 volt. So you can tie it into your lighting system, and when the lights turn on, the circulation pumps for the jets will turn on with that. I don't use them mainly because they're so low a flow. You don't get a lot of, so in reef tanks where we talk about like the surge pumps or wave makers or anything like that, yeah, you'll get that pulsing hard shot, but there's a lot of torque in those little pumps. Like I have little power heads in the tank downstairs, and they'll come on, they'll surge and really push water to make it start waving. The ones that Aquascape came out, there's a lot of their products that they're definitely for homeowner use, not on the commercial side. So it's much easier, depending on the skimmer we use. Some of those skimmers, especially Aquascape, you can put 2 5,000-gallon pumps in that skimmer. It's designed for that.
Right.
So we can take one pump and turn it into a circulation pump, and create our jets off that, while our other pump is running our waterfall and everything on the other side. So there's a few things you can do with the circulation pumps and things like that. Submersible pumps are always the simplest to put in there, but now you have to worry about any settling debris, getting around the pump, clogging it up, so it's a maintenance issue at that point. So, the
I've
easiest
got
thing is
a
always
tree over mine.
the big tree, yeah. Yes, sir.
You're saying something different than I've heard, and that is the water, the water movement. I always thought of the turn it over once an hour, or whatever the rule of thumb is, was to get it through the filter more. You're saying there's actually an advantage to just having the water move that much.
Yeah.
You gotta get it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because
so-
I was right under the impression you just wanted to get it through the filter that many more times to clean it. You're
So-
saying there's importance to just having water movement.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
But I just
So if
heard
you
that.
watch, if you see in koi ponds where, let's say you have a jet and it's got a significant 1,500, 2,000 gallons of water coming out of that jet. Not a huge amount, but it's good enough. You'll see the fish come up to that jet, stop swimming, just kind of float backwards, come up to it, under your waterfalls. When the water's coming over them, they play underneath there. It flushes their skin, it flushes their gills, and it helps. So we're at a barn. Do you know, he's a koi member, Jason Wong? Okay, so he had a commercial pond built to grow koi, specifically Japanese koi. All of his flow is at one end. There's jets facing in one direction, all of the skimmers are at this end. Those fish have to constantly try to swim upstream. And so when they do, that's the shallow end, closest to the jets. So they swim up there, they try to play in that current constantly. It's like us working out constantly. So they get
Swim
bigger and
spots.
bigger. Yeah. So essentially, they're getting healthier. because they're using their bodies more, they're using their fins more. They're not just stagnant at the bottom where parasites can attach to them and bacteria can take over. So that water movement is huge. Now we don't want Niagara Falls going through there where they're constantly battling and stressing them out. So there is a fine line that you have to watch. But just like in aquariums, like in reef tanks, we try to simulate the ocean movements and stuff as much as we can. Not just with currents, but with the light variations throughout the day, and how sunlight comes up and goes down. Our lights do all that. They're filter feeders in aquariums. So with the fish, and movement in the pond, it's not just for the fish, it's also for sediment debris. So you're not going to get those dead pockets. Maybe your top is all moving and you can see there's no stagnant areas at the top, but what about below the water column? You can get pockets because of the way rocks come together and there's a dead spot in there. You just kind of pile on debris, and then all of a sudden now you're getting these algae out blooms and stuff. So trying to make it where we don't have dead spots anywhere throughout the pond, we have a nice steady current down below where they're comfortable and they're still swimming normal and they can relax. But in Japan, if you look at some of their ponds, they almost look still across the board. But underneath, there's a lot of water movement in those ponds and a lot of turnover through the filter. Slow water through UV light is good. The more water, the more time that water can stay around that bulb, it'll kill more algae, more bacteria. So in that case, sometimes we have to separate a filter and a UV light to control the flow between the two. The more water I can put through my filter, especially if it's a bead filter or a pressure filter or something like that, the more debris I'm going to collect out of the pond. But through a UV light, if we want to kill off some of those free-flowing parasites or the algae within the algae column, we slow it down past the UV lights, and the more time it has to actually kill that, the better off and clearer the water will spend. So there's a little bit of a balance between all the systems and all the plumbing and why some of our ball valves and stuff like that we use are very redundant, but it's always for a purpose, whether it be to block water off when we're cleaning or slow it down in one direction and push more in another direction. So, but the circulation is always the key in all of these ponds. Our second pond out here, we just increased the water flow, going over the waterfall, going through another pressure filter, a different brand, which is a Owasa pressure filters. We've used two of them out here now. They're phenomenal filters, just as quality as the Ponmax ones were. If you're going to add any kind of external filtration to an existing pond, the boxes, if you don't do all your research or ask, some of the boxes are a little deceiving. The filters, like a 7200 Ponmax, it's actually good up to about 3,000 gallons with fish. So just figure most filters, whatever they say they're rated up to in ponds, it's about half that when you have fish in a viable around that pond. So that'll keep you where a lot of people want to go basically 1 for 1. So I got 2,000 gallons, this filter's good to 2,000 gallons, that's what I want to use. Bad idea. More filtration, just like aquariums, always better. You're not going to over-filter your water.
More is better.
More is always better, yes. And does everybody have like koi ponds or goldfish ponds, or is it just like regular water features, ponds, waterfalls, or anything like that?
We have from 55,000 gallons to 1,000 gallon in here.
Okay. Is anyone thinking or come across wanting to shut down a pond and turn it into a pondless waterfall? Well, I asked because that's been a big thing over the last 2 years.
I just need you to come over to my house with dynamite.
Every pond we put in solid rock.
It is solid, that's why the bottom of my pond is irregular. It's
I'm trying to find this, sorry. Pondless water features are the craze for people that don't have a lot of time. They want the water and they want the plants, they don't want the fish. So we've got into a lot of pondless water features, and this is probably last year, this is probably the most features we installed was ponds versus ponds. They're good additions to small backyards, front yards. We don't have to worry about HOAs with pondless water features. There's no body of water. So when we want to put it in the front yard, we don't have to have approvals, usually like a pool approval or anything like that, because there's no kids are going to drown or anything. Still have architectural committees we got to deal with HOAs to put in any kind of change in the front yard, but they're much simpler. They get put together real similar to lawn filters. It's a little bit reversed because the water's going in and then being taken out, whereas the water's coming into the lawn and going out through the gravel. With these, the bubbling rock feature right outside the office here, that was done like this, just doesn't have the waterfalls. And then we put in one upon us by the goldfish house and one at the back corner of the property too. There's a pondless waterfall. That is, again, to show people, if you don't want the ponds, you don't want to deal with the koi and food and everything else, and bacteria, and you can go and still have a nice feature. Still put in all your plants. They might not be as creative as your ponds, or you can put in 15 different varieties, but we can still use some plants around the features. Yes, ma'am.
So to build a pondless waterfall, say similar to that, what is the approximate cost?
The one right outside here, by the goldfish house, usually starts at about 6,000 and go up from there.
Is that materials, labor?
That's everything. Total turnkey. Into this one. This is, let me go back. Not the greatest of pictures, I'm sorry, I'm not a photographer. Hopefully I get that boss. Well, this is Rainbow Gardens on Thousand Oaks. The pit itself is 15 feet long and 6 feet wide underneath here with aqua blocks. There's a 12,000 gallon an hour pump underneath this rock. And it comes down 2 different ways. Overall, from the actual big rocks to the back, I think we're pushing, I think it's 16 feet, almost 24 feet across. That's a $20,000.
So you have a liner under there?
There's a liner underneath the whole thing, always using the regular EPDM rubber liner. And then at the top, there's just there's a flat box called a spillway box. My preference is always to go to Aquascape products. They're tried and true, they work. I just don't use Aquascape pumps. They sell them, but they're more for a replacement, but the price point is just through the roof.
What pumps do you prefer?
Atlantic.
Atlantic.
Yeah, Atlantic TT series pumps. They're very true to their flow rates that are on the boxes. I just don't have problems with them. We have very minimal returns on them. The price point is right. It's a very good pump across the board. And it's the second largest company out there for pond manufacturers.
Are you officially an Aquascape certified contractor, or no? Because that
So
allows
that
you-
is a funny question.
Because that allows you to
So,
choose a little more.
well,
Not being.
kind of. So, I did our CAC certification for bid. Their guy at Aquascape that goes on and approves you or cancels you went on our website, went on the Facebook page, and wouldn't approve us. Wouldn't approve us because we use ultimate bead filters and we use pressure filters and we use everything Aquascape at the time did not manufacture or did not have. We use external plumbing, external pumps, Performance Pro pumps. They didn't like it like that. Aquascape, 10 years ago, if you didn't use their product, you weren't a CAC.
Right.
You were not allowed to use any other product on the market if you wanted to be a CAC.
Basically, like a franchise.
Correct.
That's where maybe.
It's come across now. It's a great program for teaching people how to build ponds the right way. It's a great program. Greg, the owner, has come up with a phenomenal system. A majority of the way we build is based on a lot of Aquascape's ways. Here in Texas, it's just totally different. Right? They tell you can put in a medium-sized pond kit in 2 days. Good luck when you're in the hill country. You'll be jackhammering for 2 days.
That's why the
Yeah. So,
it's cheaper to go.
We were approved for the CAC program 2 years ago. They didn't care anymore for whatever reason came through, and by that time we were already 2.5, 3 years into trying to get it. I'm not worried about it.
Right.
It does nothing
Build
for
up
me.
your business.
Yeah, it does nothing for me. I have text from the owner himself saying, I asked him, why would I limit myself to just one way of building? We have people that have concrete ponds and all kinds of different ways to build that have been done here, not in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to limit myself to being able to help people or my guys' knowledge. So we get leads still from Aquascape. We're a wholesaler for Aquascape through the store now and everything. They're great products on most of their stuff. They never had large waterfall pumps up until last year. Now they're doing 12 and 15,000 gallon hour water pumps that are high flow, big flange mount external. Yeah, the 12,000 pump is a $2,500 pump.
Yeah.
So I'll never use some of those products with theirs, but they have a dosing system. For you guys with small ponds, there's a dosing system that Aquascape makes that has 3 or 4 different types of chemicals that you can dose in. One of them is maintain. That's probably my favorite. It's a bacteria and it's got a little bit of algaecide in it. And you set it, there's a little sticker on there, you press a button, 500, 1,000 gallons, 1,500 gallons, 2,000 gallons, so whatever size your pond is, and it automatically doses a certain amount of ounces of that pond each day. It's on its own system. There is a larger commercial version of it now that you can use gallon jugs, not just these little pouches. When our pouches run out, I fill them with algaecide from one of the other brands because there's no reason to keep buying that.
I do like their, and they don't make it anymore as a problem, but you were talking about plants.
Mhm.
Remember back in the day, they used to build pockets.
Sure.
Water lilies.
Sure.
Like you're talking about 1990.
Yep.
But they had their pellet fertilizer, the annual fertilizer.
Yeah.
I buy it every time I can find that. I'll buy it because that's what I use on.
Yeah, so like I said, they have a lot of great products. I mean, they're
They-
tried and true, they've been tested for years. Yes.
Oh, no, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead, you're fine.
Okay, so you were talking about the pumps that you prefer. How do they do on cost of electricity? Some
Your
of the,
small pumps,
some of our pumps, we had one pump that was horrible, and you replaced it,
Was
and
it
it's
swimming
better.
He's got, how many thousand gallons is your pond?
90,000, 100,000.
you're at a different level. Right? I mean, seriously, I mean, it's just reality. You're at a different level, right? So you're not gonna see.
We have dead spots,
Sure,
I know that.
but the difference between, that's like me going to 65,000 gallons, right? I cannot use anything from a horse and a half or a horse and 3/4 pump lower that's gonna be just a standard plug, 115 volt. I'm not gonna be efficient. I'm running at 3,700 RPMs an hour, I'm running at peak performance constantly, they're not a multi-speed pump, so you're gonna be using up electricity through the roof. So when we get to that many gallons, we need that much turnover, we start going into 2 horsepower and above. Now we're at 240 volts, now we're much cleaner electricity. So now you're gonna lower your usage, it's a much more efficient pump, and a majority of those pumps get into multi-speed pumps. So that you can have timers on those pumps, whether it's like a Performance Pro makes one, they've been backordered, but we get into full on pool pumps at that point. As long as we have check valves in line, I don't care about the self-timing mechanisms of these pumps when we're talking that size. But we're more concerned about energy usage. You have to do it. I have 4 pumps on that 65,000 gallon pond. So I have to really think about electricity at that point. So we go into programmable pumps. So at night, the pumps can slow down, the water flows will shut off, things like that. You're not using as much at night. So somewhere along the line, you can save some money on that electrical curve.
Because we got our pump from Shane. When we used to just have a regular pool pump.
Sure.
And then it switched. I wish I could tell you. I can tell you what it looks like, but
Black,
it's
big
black, big. Yeah.
Performance Pro. It's the one he always sold. Yeah, Performance Pro is the one that he always sold. Unless it was you really specified exactly what you wanted, it was probably 2 horsepower or less, because that's all he ever
That
did.
sounds right.
Yeah.
You've got 2
Um,
ponds though, right?
Right,
But it's
they
one
were tied
system.
together.
It's
Oh,
one
it
Yeah,
is
so-
tied together.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
When we go into anything above 2 horsepower, it's special order, you can go up to a 4-inch pump with Performance Pro, and they're high flow, and they'll go up to 46 or 47,000 gallons an hour.
Well, it's just, we have the water goes through a little trough for filtration, and then there's a waterfall and a second waterfall. I just don't want the water to be spurting out, like saws and they're,
No, for sure, yeah, and that goes into how do we return water, so we can take X amount of water out, depending on our pump, if it's 15,000 gallon pump, we can take it out of there at 15,000. How do we return 15,000 back into the pond? There's no biofall or anything a box at the top that you can install that handles 15,000 gallons. That's a custom pit where piping is just over and you're dispersing water that way. When you're at that size ponds, you're a whole other beast.
and it's
Yeah,
real, you
we
can't
just accept what
retrofit,
we
you
can.
can't retrofit this.
Well,
system.
what is your struggles?
Was what?
What is your struggle with your pond?
Oh, well, no, we never have a real clear pond until we get to
Okay.
this time of year, when everything dies, because it's
Right.
We can't keep it clean. And I got a bog that's way undersized.
Okay.
And then we've got that filtration with your
Which is
performance
undersized,
flow.
which is undersized.
Which is probably, but I think it did save us quite a bit on electricity.
What
We
kind of
kept it
skimmer
safe.
system do you have on there?
Skimmer? We have no skimmer.
Okay, so where does all the falling debris go?
For winter, until the oak trees finish
March.
doing their thing, we have a net over the pond where the leaves are, so
Okay.
we get that helps, that
Okay.
has
And
helped.
then she vacuums out with a sump pump once in the spring for all the dead algae and everything on the other pond.
Okay.
And the rock-
It's-
all the
So,
rock that
the
gets-
other thing to think of when we get into large ponds like that are what's called intake bays. So most of our skimmer boxes and things like that, they can't handle up to much more than about 10,000 gallons. The Atlantic version can go up to 15,000 gallons. But still, in a pump that has that much or a pond that has that much surface area, it's very hard to get all that debris into one little box. So we create a secondary, we call it a negative edge or a 0 edge zone where the water can flow through there and it just takes all the debris out. It drops it onto a pile of rocks that are in there, and there's a pump in there that circulates like that.
Pondless waterfall.
It's essentially a pondless waterfall. So you take one end of your pond and you create a negative edge, just like on a swimming pool where it just looks like it disappears over. You're doing the same thing with your pond. You can make it 2 foot wide, you can make it 10 foot wide. It's just a matter of how fast you can return that water back to your pond at that point. Because there's still, every foot, you figure it's about 1,500 gallons gonna come over that.
So that'd be like using one end of your pond as a bog.
No, because the water's coming in, it's not coming up through it. So you're only circulating, it's just coming over like a waterfall,
Right.
and the debris is getting sucked out, and then you can just go in there and vacuum it or blow it out, and that's it. So, but that's the easiest way to get water moving on a pond that size and start getting it turning over more. You can take, if you do your opening, and you calculate it out correctly, let's say it's 10,000 gallons, and you put a 10,000 or an 8,000 pump in there, as long as that intake bay is wide enough to handle that many gallons of water, you'll turn over your pond constantly. And a lot of that debris that normally settles, the fine sediment where you can't see where it's cloudy and stuff like that, it'll start coming out. It'll start collecting in that pit over there. The other thing is, have you used like the pond bombs? Most of them have
Beneficial bacteria?
basically, some of them have that in them, and then some of them are also a flocculant. So
I did a flocculant one time, and then we had all this crap floating, all over the pond. That was horrible.
so it just depends on what you use. So there's a
Yeah.
company that we use called Hartford. They're actually a chemical company that builds or designs chemicals for the oil field and stuff like that. Has anybody used the sludge pellets that Shane sold in their ponds? Okay, that comes from Hartford. That was a pellet derived for fracking tanks. So when they had it for water fracking tanks, they didn't want all that sediment and debris building up at the bottom of those water tanks. So when they pump it out, it had to be fresh, it had to be clean. They didn't want all that sediment coming out through their pumps and clogging their pumps. So Hartford designed this natural bacteria that activates when it hits water and it would clean those tanks. Well, it went into being able to be used in ponds because it's all natural. There's nothing to hurt your fish, it doesn't hurt the ecosystem, and it just breaks down sediment and debris and organic matter. cleans it. That same company makes a product called Extreme. And Extreme gets sprayed over the pond. And it's a blocking. It'll take algae and drop it to the bottom. Within about 24 hours, it takes all that floating debris and sinks it. It's a pretty amazing product. We've used it on some stock ponds where you actually got to get out in a john boat. We have a little electric sprayer. We go out across the entire little lake and spray it. Very good product for these larger ponds.
What's it called again?
But then it's on the bottom.
You can't, it won't be online. It only comes, we're the ones that can get that particular
Okay,
product.
but it's called what? Extreme?
Extreme. Yep.
And it's a spray.
Yep. That's a liquid. That's a really good one for the larger ponds to be able
But
to.
then you have to get it off the bottom.
You can start what we call a chemical regimen where you're using natural bacteria or the sludge pellets, because there's also a liquid, because you can use liquid digesters and you can use pelletized digesters. On our larger ponds, one, I think it's 180,000 gallons, if I remember right. It was Sean Elliott's old house from the Spurs. Huge, he had bass in there, and he brought in peacock bass from Brazil. All these crazy fish were in there at one time. You can't clean it, it's impossible. There's a million plants around there, you could tend them and do all that, but you'll never clean it because the sheer amount of money you'll spend, because they're not on a well, and give it back to saws to refill.
I think he was on the
Yeah, it's just forget about it. It's just, so in order to keep that water clear, which I can't tell you a time unless the bottom gets stirred up, and his pond was never cleared. It goes to 9 feet at the deepest. 1 month we use liquid, the next month we go into pelletized. So sometimes with the pelletized, we'll add in beneficial bacteria at certain points in the year so that we can boost the bacteria levels and help us break down the organic matter in there. So he has a lot of fish, like they're like perch and little bluegill, but he has koi in there. And you can see him at 8-9 feet, no problem.
Wow.
So,
That's what
but
I
it's,
would try.
yeah, it goes into we try to stay as natural as possible. I don't like getting into heavy chemical use, but when we use natural digesters and things that are more organic based, completely fine with it. We do
So
have to. Go ahead.
I know ours is a unique situation, most people don't have that kind of a,
Uh-huh.
but do you make site visits
Sure.
and then make a recommendation?
Always.
on it?
Yeah, so we will come out. Club members, we don't charge to come out. The normal site visits to go on properties within, I think Pam, she put it into a 25 to 30 mile radius is $85 and it goes up from there. But normally, yeah, we come out, no problem.
Yeah, we're on the edge of that.
Yeah.
Over by SeaWorld. over
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah, we go.
And they have a very cool pond.
How long have you guys been out?
It started when Bert was here.
Okay.
And Mary Ann, who had the property, she had it dynamite blasted out of the stone is the story. And he helped her put the liner in, so we have a liner. from
The only
way back.
reason I ask is the pond
And if
crew.
you have the little box with all the little 3x5 cards in there, they're
Oh.
in there.
Okay. Well, the pond crew, he lived over there.
Yeah, I did.
His entire backyard was his pond. And he had waterfalls everywhere.
Yeah, I remember,
And
it's
it
got
was a-
music.
Yeah.
John, I can't remember the last
Grass
name.
is an invasive species.
Oh, yeah.
This pond was on the pond tour one year I went over and saw it.
Yeah.
Sounds like over the turtles.
Yeah, he had an amazing setup coming down on the map.
Yep. Yeah, it looked like something out of like Colorado. But, that pond is all ecosystem-based pond, right? I mean, that's, John had built, 2,000-3,000 or more ponds from either Arizona or New Mexico he originally was from. And then moved here, amazing at what he did. Just, family fell apart, everything else. He's still around. I mean, I picked up a property a couple weeks ago that his son was taking care of, but it's just a train wreck, and they just don't do it as good as what they used to. So, but he was a IT guy. He went to Rackspace, and that's where he worked. And now I think Rackspace is closing or moving or something. And I heard he's back in town. So, yeah, that's the ecosystem way of building. It works as long as it's done correctly, and we struggle, we've seen a lot of struggles with large ponds, clarity
You're
issues.
just gonna have to, like, I mean, for a pond their size, a bog would be,
This size.
I mean, you've got.
I mean, you're talking 20-30% of the surface area of a
Yeah.
pond that size. I mean, then you're worried about you have acreage instead of just a normal lot,
But
you know.
he's
for-
got places to put a reef, that's different.
Anyway, yeah, we don't need to,
Yeah, but just for instance, where we're talking about cost difference with a bog, like the old style piping bog versus the aquascape style, you know, you could have 60% more cost in building it the aquascape way versus the traditional piping and everything like that, but, you
how
know.
deep is it in Aquascape bog?
So it depends.
Ours
on-
is 18 inches, that's what they're recommending.
Yeah, so it depends on the overall size of the pond itself, or the body of water you're trying to circulate. I mean, they can go from 3 foot on up to 8-9 feet.
Like,
And yours is deep, it's like what, 10 foot deep or something?
no, the pond is 6.5.
6.5.
On the deep side.
Yeah.
there's a, I don't know, if, and I haven't had any experience, so I can't recommend it. Have you seen there's a company that makes aqua blocks, but not aqua blocks.
Well, Easy Pro makes them, Atlantic makes them, Aquascape makes them. There's a lot of different matrix blocks, because once you get out of, because no one can obviously say aqua block if you're.
Right.
So it gets into matrix blocks, you know, there's different names for them all. They all do the same thing. We haven't used the Easy Pro. Easy Pro is probably the next one I would go to besides Atlantic, between the three. Easy Pro makes a lot of really cool products. You know, if you have a walkway that's next to a pond, but you want to skim it, but you don't want the skimmer right on the pond, you can put the skimmer on this side of the walkway. They make a snorkel that can go under the walkway and go to the pond. They make some really cool products.
That's where mine is.
So this here, this is a wrench. Sister Hill. The waterfalls where all those colored lights are at that end. There's 6 waterfalls. Comes through. When we get down here, this entire section is a bog.
I just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So, let's say I have a bog and I wanted to convert it over to aquascape.
Okay.
Is that feasible?
Sure.
And I get approximate cost. My pond is
Yeah.
55,000 gallons. It is a natural swimming pond.
Sure.
I have koi in there. In summer and spring, we'll be swimming in there.
Okay.
You got 3 bugs, don't you?
I have 2 bogs. I have 3 waterfalls.
Where are you located?
See?
I've been to yours.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember your pond.
No,
It was afterwards.
it was before.
No, that's right. It was before you had it installed, but I know the area that you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, I know. There's very few people that have natural swimming ponds, that's why I asked.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
It should.
That is true.
So, you know, it goes into a cost factor. So, and this one here will be kind of a good thing for you.
Okay.
The pit that is back here, there was the owner, he's gonna put this Japanese tea house on this deck, just for people to sit and look at the feature. He wanted it to look similar to the Guadalupe River, because that's what's on the backside of the property, so he wanted to mimic that on here. But this is a arboretum as well, so he has groups of kids that come out here. So at the far end, on the other side of the river bridge, there's actually a beach with a sand entrance into this stream. This had 326 aqua blocks. You figure, I think there's $70 a piece. He bought them at cost. So if you do the math on that, you see,
And how long do they last?
what do you, how long? They're plastic. They're plastic, they'll never break down. They're not gonna ever break down. Yeah, and I mean, the ones that we have down here, because we created a system, like just a flat, base in this feature down here, we can drive a car over it. They're super strong. But at 326 blocks, and looking at that cost,
$22,400.
Sure. and that didn't get into the 4 3-horsepower pumps that are out there that are all 240
Where to put
volts
them
apiece.
in?
Huh?
Where
Yeah,
to
or
put
put
them
them
in.
in, sure. So that's where, when you start getting into where you have to go and filter, 60,000 gallons, 40,000, 50,000 gallons, you start combining and getting really creative at that point. So a bog is great, but so are plants around the edges of your pond. They do the same thing. Right? They're still sucking up the nutrients and the phosphates in the water, so that'll help you control your algae. The coming through where the water's coming out through the bog and everything, that helps filter a lot of the sediment, fine debris and stuff that's in the actual main body of the water. So they're kind of doing this two
See,
different
I've never
things.
had a problem with algae.
Yeah.
I've never had algae in my
Yeah,
water.
and that's because of the amount of beneficial bacteria that gets in your water and around your pond and through the rocks and in the gravel, everything else that help balance your pond. And so that you're a perfect example of why the ecosystem works. When you have enough surface area, same in your filters. If you have a filter or a pond that is liner only, but you have a filter system that has enough surface area inside media to hold beneficial bacteria to support that amount of load you're putting on that pond, your pond will stay crystal clear. So that.
This is another thing that you said that kind of confuses me a little bit, in that I've always considered the plants and the bog to be one package. And the plants are what make the bog work. You're kind of going like that's
It's
right
two
there,
different
that those plants, it's just filtration up through gravel.
Correct. Two different things. This is right when it was put in, and this is when it was taken. There was actually, a lot here, probably 200 plants that we put in. You know, if you bought plants here, we get plants here, they're typically about that big, right? They're really small, they're just tiny. So it didn't fill out yet in this picture. So 2 years later, after seasons and changes and everything else, and bacteria in the water, those plants, this whole thing is completely covered with plants.
Okay, that makes
So,
sense.
Yeah, now we get into things where we're looking at aesthetics. You know, where I placed the plants in this were from different directions. When you're looking, everything looks like it's stair-stepped up and everything. So now that's a whole other bullshit. But yeah, with the plants.
We were just looking at an earlier stage.
Yeah, this is just totally vague stage of the pond. That was it. It was more for the construction of how it looked than anything else. But the 65,000 gallon pond, it was a swim pond. That's what we did the same thing. And that one has a 20 foot by 20 foot bog. It was about 18 inches deep. We're 12 inches of gravel and we're about 6 inches of water on top. Because most of your marginal plants get much more than that, you start to kill off things. So at 20 by 20 plus a big Ultima pressure filter outside, which was an Ultima 30,000 gallon filter, 4 pumps and 1 pump in their intake bay. So we were using 5 pumps on that particular pond, crystal clear. So you don't have to change over the bog if it's functioning and working. The problem is though, after 5, 10, whatever years, you're going to get into having to clean that bog out.
I've already cleaned it out once.
Yeah, see, so.
We've got a bog cleaning job coming up, and I'm like, okay, bring your all those plugs. 'cause this is too
Yeah,
good.
so, and that's the hard part, you know, so, you can go in, there's different ways that you can, if you're gonna take it apart, you can go back in with aqua blocks, you may have to dig it a little bit deeper, then you have a liner change. So, how deep do you wanna get into it? You know, what's the cost that you wanna really spend into it? You could drop 20,000, yeah, it'd be an easy transition to 20 grand at a 20-foot bog, if that's, you know, what you're trying to do. Easy.
I think I'll stay where
Yeah. So looking at maybe the plumbing. So, but look at the plumbing. So you could take and if you don't have clean out along the edges where the lines go out to the edges, you can put 90s right there, elbows, and put little clean out caps all around.
Add more pipes.
You could add more pipes. You could take 4-inch or 6-inch corrugated pipe and run another grid next to your existing pipes in there and put a larger tube where you could drop a sump pump down there and clean it out more often. There's different things and techniques you can do to still save on cost, but you can still get the same results. It's definitely a challenge when you get into these big bog filters. They get expensive, but for the ease of maintenance and longevity, they're definitely the way to go. I'm not going anywhere. I'm pretty sure I'm here. I feel like I just signed up life. Okay.
And as you can see, we have different variety of ponds and
Yeah. Well, part of, just real quick, part of my background in getting to these large ponds is for when I design our ponds, I'm the one that does all the filtration. So I get into the hydraulics and all the flow rates and all that stuff and make sure they actually function through the filters and they do what they're supposed to do. While the guys will go out, Carlos, he's my go-to. He can find leaks, he can find everything else. But when it comes out to the actual filter system design, I always do that. So definitely that's a knowledge when it comes into questions.
Mine was built by the internet, maybe, and a school teacher, so, you know, there are a lot of us that didn't know. what we
Sure.
didn't know.
Okay.
And now we need tweaks and help and.
Yeah, but we get into a lot of the DIY ponds. We do a lot of repairs with DIY. That's easy enough. We'll help out wherever we can.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Bye.
Thank you guys.